Admiral Corvash of the Hegemony's Third Fleet barely suppressed his amusement as the human delegation's ships appeared on the tactical display. 12 vessels, if they could even be called that. The largest was perhaps 300 meters long, dwarfed by his flagship's impressive 2-kilometer bulk. Around the bridge, his officers exchanged knowing glances and barely contained chuckles. "This is what they send to negotiate?" Commander Zelix wheezed through his breathing apparatus, his species equivalent of laughter causing the membrane sacs around his neck to flutter. "We have maintenance drones larger than their warships." The humans had been the galaxy's newest joke for the past 50 years. A primitive species that had barely crawled out of their gravity well, yet somehow managed to spread across a handful of systems with their laughably primitive technology. No energy shields, no plasma weaponry, no faster-than-light communication arrays. They still used chemical propulsion for their smaller craft and crude fusion drives for interstellar travel. "Shall we proceed with the standard terms, Admiral?" asked his tactical officer, pulling up the subjugation protocols on the main screen. "Complete surrender, technology transfer, and integration into our labor force?" Corvash nodded, still watching the pitiful human formation. They had arranged themselves in what appeared to be some sort of battle line, which only added to the absurdity. The entire Galactic Council had designated humanity as a Class 7 civilization, barely worthy of notice, let alone concern. The communication channel crackled to life, and a weathered human face appeared on screen. Admiral Sarah Chen, according to their intelligence files. One of their military leaders, though what kind of military this species could field was questionable at best. "Admiral Corvash," she said, her voice steady despite the overwhelming odds. "I'm transmitting our response to your surrender demands." Corvash's mandibles clicked in amusement. "I do hope you've seen reason, Admiral Chen. Your species has potential, but this posturing serves no one." "Oh, we've seen reason, all right," Chen replied, and something in her tone made Corvash's amusement falter slightly. "We've also seen your fleet compositions, your tactics, and your technology specifications. Our response is simple: no." "No?" Corvash's voice carried a dangerous edge. "Admiral, perhaps you fail to understand the situation. We have 200 ships of the line, each outgunning your entire fleet. Surrender now, and your people will be treated with the standard considerations for new vassals." Chen smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Admiral, perhaps you fail to understand something about humans. We don't build our ships to look pretty. We build them to kill." The transmission cut, and Corvash stared at the blank screen for a moment before turning to his tactical officer. "Scan their vessels again. Full spectrum analysis." The results came back identical to their previous scans. No energy shields, primitive armor plating, and weapon signatures that barely registered on their sensors. Corvash almost felt sorry for them. "All ships," he broadcast to his fleet. "Prepare for demonstration bombardment. Target their lead vessel. Perhaps watching one of their ships die will—" The tactical display exploded into chaos. The human ships had opened fire, but not with the energy weapons or plasma cannons the hegemony expected. Instead, streams of what appeared to be solid projectiles erupted from their vessels at velocities that made Corvash's instruments scream warnings. "Impossible!" Zelix gasped as the first projectiles struck the hegemony's forward line. "Those are kinetic weapons, primitive railguns, and—" His words were cut off as one of their destroyers simply ceased to exist. Where the burning Talon had been a moment before, there was now only expanding debris and superheated gas. The humans' primitive kinetic weapons had punched through its energy shields as if they weren't there. The massive tungsten projectiles carrying enough energy to shatter the vessel's hull like glass. "Shields don't stop kinetic weapons." Chen's voice came over an open channel, her tone almost conversational. "Funny thing about physics, it works the same everywhere. You focused so much on energy weapons and defensive fields that you forgot the most basic principle of warfare. Mass times acceleration equals dead enemies." Another destroyer died, then a cruiser. The human projectiles were moving at significant fractions of light speed, and the hegemony's energy shields, designed to deflect plasma and particle beams, were utterly useless against solid matter moving at relativistic velocities. "Return fire," Corvash roared, but his ship's targeting systems were struggling. The human vessels were small, fast, and their weapons had no energy signature to track back to source. The humans had turned warfare into mathematics. While the galaxy had evolved beyond kinetic weapons millennia ago, humanity had perfected them. Their ships might have been small, but they were essentially flying gun platforms, each one capable of accelerating tungsten rods to velocities that turned them into relativistic kill vehicles. "Sir," the sensor operator called out, panic creeping into his voice. "They're projectiles. They're using gravity-assist trajectories. They're not firing in straight lines. They're using stellar mechanics to curve their shots around our defensive formations." Corvash watched in growing horror as his fleet began to come apart. The humans weren't just using kinetic weapons, they were using celestial mechanics as part of their targeting solutions. Projectiles fired from one ship would slingshot around nearby gravitational fields to strike targets that thought they were safely behind cover. "How?" he whispered as another cruiser died, torn apart by a tungsten rod that had somehow curved through three-dimensional space to strike it from an impossible angle. "We've had 300 years to think about this," Chen's voice answered, as if she'd heard his question. 300 years of being the weakest species in a galaxy full of energy weapons and shields. So we did what humans do best. We found another way. The Executor, Corvash's own flagship, shuddered as projectiles began finding their mark. The energy shields that had protected the hegemony for millennia were worse than useless. They actually helped the kinetic weapons by providing a fixed reference point for targeting calculations. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, voice hollow with disbelief, "we've lost 60% of the fleet. Their weapons have a reach of—" He paused, checking his instruments. "Everything. If they can see it, they can kill it." Corvash looked at the tactical display, watching the red icons of his ships wink out one by one. The human fleet hadn't lost a single vessel. Their tiny ships danced between the hegemony's lumbering giants like gnats, each one delivering death at impossible ranges with weapons the galaxy had forgotten could be so devastating. "Stand down," he whispered. Then louder, "All ships, stand down." The human projectiles stopped coming, though Corvash realized with cold certainty that there were probably dozens of tungsten rods still in flight, their arrival times calculated to the nanosecond. Chen's face reappeared on the screen, no longer smiling. "The galaxy laughed at humanity's tiny fleet, Admiral. I hope you understand now why that was a mistake. We don't need big ships when we can make small ones hit like gods." Corvash stared at the tactical display showing the scattered remains of what had been the hegemony's third fleet. In less than 20 minutes, 12 primitive human vessels had destroyed a force that had conquered 17 star systems. "What are your terms?" he asked quietly. "Leave our space. Don't come back. And tell the galaxy that Earth remembers every insult, every slight, and every moment they spent laughing at us." Chen's expression was granite. "Because next time, we won't just be using tungsten." As the surviving hegemony ships limped away from human space, Corvash realized that the galaxy's understanding of warfare had just changed forever. Humanity had reminded everyone of a truth that had been forgotten among the energy weapons and exotic technologies. Sometimes the old ways were the best ways, especially when perfected by a species that refused to surrender. The galaxy had laughed at humanity's tiny fleet. None of them were laughing now.